My sermon invitation this morning is to go deep. Go deep in your relationship with God. Jesus says, remain in me, and I will remain in you. For the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be preaching on what I call emotionally healthy discipleship. This is a new curriculum that we're about to launch in our church. There are 2 courses. We're going to offer the first in February, 8-week course. The second one will be in the fall. We're going to launch it starting February 13th. It's 8 weeks, 2 hours at a time, and I want to strongly encourage you to participate. And the whole premise of this new curriculum is that if we want to be spiritually strong, spiritually mature, then we also must be emotionally healthy. So that's what we're going to be working on, our interior. So sign up for the course. One of the core principles of emotionally healthy discipleship is that we are to remain in loving union with God. If we're to bear fruit in the world, fruit that will last and will transform the world, then we first and foremost have to remain in loving union. Now, what does this mean, loving union? It's a willingness. It is a willingness to give loving access, full access. Give God full access to your entire life. In this metaphor that Jesus uses, he says, remain. We sang the song just a moment ago, abide. Another word for this word that is used in the Bible here is to hang with me. Stick with it. Stay in connection. Make home in me. I want to ask you, are you at home in God? When you lift your heart to God, whether you're out in nature walking or you're here in church singing a song or you're with friends and family or doing your morning prayers, are you at home? At perfect peace when you're in the presence of God? Can you hear God say to you in a loving way, I love you? This is what we're talking about when I mention loving union with God. But you see, we live in a world that, well, let me just say this. One of the things that we can take away from this rich imagery of Jesus being the vine and we are the branches is how dependent, radically dependent we are on God. Pat, your prayer, you nailed it when you said how much we depend on God. You know, when the pandemic first hit, those mid-March in 2020, for about 2 weeks, even the most powerful people in the world had zero clue what we were going to do. And the whole world tuned in to church. You remember? I don't care if you're a small church or you're a larger church. Our numbers, it was virtual, but our Facebook numbers multiplied exponentially. Some of you watched more than one church, and that was okay. You couldn't get enough. You were turning to God. But see, life gets busy. And the world is telling us that if you will you can take matters into your own hands. The world wants us to believe that we're in control. And so it says to us, buy this, spend that, do this, marry that person, build bigger and better and stronger and higher. Take matters into your own hands and you will be a success. You will be in control. And what has happened is this message from our culture has leaked in and it shapes the church. So that we're worried about superficial things. Our faith tends to be more on the surface than it does beneath in our interior. I grew up in a church. I've served it for 20 years now. And one of the first things our denominations wants us to report is what? Numbers. How many people are in the pews? How much money did you raise this year? And so you go to annual conference, and if you've had a lot of people join your church that year, you just walk around all with a lot of pride, because that's what it's superficial. And Jesus had something to say about this. These religious leaders that walked around in these fancy robes and these leaders that thought they had it all figured out. Here's what Jesus calls them. He calls them hypocritical and whitewashed tombs. Hear this from Matthew's Gospel, the Message Bible translation. Jesus says, "You're hopeless. You religion scholars and Pharisees, frauds. You're like manicured grave plots, grass clipped and flowers bright. But 6 feet down, go deep, 6 feet down, it's all rotting bones and worm-eaten flesh. People look at you and think you're saints, but beneath the skin, you are total frauds. I'm reading a book right now called Leading the Church in a Changing World, because guess what? The world is changing. It talks about a phrase called functional atheist. The functional atheist is the one who speaks about God as the active agent of salvation in the life of individuals and in producing a wholeness in the world, but who then assumes that nothing is going to change unless and until he or she puts his or her hand and resources to it. While speaking of depending on God, the functional atheist actively depends on his or her own agency and the resources that can be produced. Again, missing the point that the only truly renewable resource is the resources of the Holy Spirit. Now, leaders in the church aren't the only ones guilty of this. I know some of you drive around with a fish on the back of your car, or maybe that's a little dated now. You hang a cross around your neck, and yet you're breaking your neck trying to fix everything. And Jesus says this to those of us who are control freaks: not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only those who do the will of my Father who is in heaven. And many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name did we not drive out demons? And in your name did we not perform miracles? Didn't we do all this work for you? I mean, we were working our fingers to the bone. And Jesus says, I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. I'm going to do what they taught me not to do in seminary in my preaching classes. I'm going to read to you, because I can't say it any better than Peter Scazzero does in one of his books. And all his books can be found on Amazon or on his website. Here's what Scazzero says about this passage. Jesus confronts the self-deception of those who do wonderful things in his name. They prophesy, they drive out demons, they perform miracles. They are very impressive and successful in really helping people. What could be wrong with that? By all appearances, their efforts have the marks of a vibrant and growing ministry. But Jesus says, I never knew you. Now, wait a minute. How can that be? He knew us in our mother's wombs. Jesus knows every hair on our heads. He knows us better than we know ourselves. How could Jesus say, I never knew you? Scazzero goes on to say, the force of the biblical word used for the verb know refers to the intimate, personal knowing of relationship. It's similar to the oneness Adam and Eve in the garden had when they were naked and without shame. We may be sincere in saying, Lord, Lord, and have what appears to be a successful life. We may know a lot about God in our heads, but none of these things matter if we remain unknown by Christ. What matters is the genuine fruit that comes only out of a deep and surrendered connection with Jesus. I'm going to keep going here, so hang with me. Bearing fruit requires slowing down enough to give Jesus direct access to every aspect of our lives and leadership. And just because God has access to everything that is true about us does not mean that God has access to us. Loving union is an act of surrender, giving God complete access, and we cannot do that in a hurry. We must be humbly accessible with the door of our hearts continually open to him. Jesus doesn't force that on us. It's something only we can do. Let me remind you, as Methodist Christians, we believe in free will. You can't force love. God doesn't say, get over here, Claire, and remain with me. That's not how God operates. God operates out of love, and so we have to choose with our will to remain in that love. He goes on, Scazzero, the key question is, what extent is the door of our heart open to him? Have we allowed the incessant demands of life to so preoccupy us that we don't have time to keep the door open continuously? Is our abiding in Jesus sporadic, or are we operating on a kind of spiritual autopilot? Last paragraph. Remember, Jesus does not say that we can't lead or build a church without him. What he does say is that our efforts are worth nothing unless they flow out of a relationship of loving union with him. In other words, although what we do matters, who we are matters much, much more. Another way of saying this is we cannot give away. You can't bear fruit in the world. You can't give what you do not possess. So in your bulletin today, I have listed 13 signs that you and I may not be in loving union. And I want you to take this with you and reflect on these questions. An indicator that we're not in loving union with God is I feel anxiety in the tenseness and tightness in my body. I don't know about you, but my body always tells the truth. I can think in my head, I'm all right, I'm not nervous, and my stomach's in knots. Or my hands get clammy, they're clammy right now. I walk around with tense shoulders all the time. I have to remind myself to chill, relax your shoulders, Claire. We know we're not in loving union when we're not present or listening intently. I feel pressure with too much to do and too little time. I'm rushing. I give quick opinions and judgments. I'm fearful about the future. I'm overly concerned with what others think. I'm defensive, easily offended. I'm preoccupied and distracted. I'm resentful of interruptions and abrupt. That never happens to me. I am manipulative instead of patient. I am unenthusiastic or threatened by the success of others. And I talk more than I listen. You know, I like to remind us from time to time that one of the biggest obstacles standing in our way of loving God and neighbor, of living a fruitful life in the way and manner of Jesus Christ, is our busyness. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you're busy. Sometimes we say that as a badge of pride. How you doing? I'm so busy. It makes us feel important. And this is a busy world. There's lots to do and lots to pay attention to. So if we're going to remain in loving union with God, we've got to do something very countercultural, and that is slow down. And people are going to really not like you. If you've been a workaholic and all of a sudden you start slowing down so that you can be in relationship with God, people are going to be like, what's happening to you? You know, they might call you lazy. They're going to get mad when you say, no, I can't do that. There are limits to my time. I'm not busy. I'm just limited. I only have so much time. We're going to have to slow down, and we're going to be really weird when we do that. People aren't going to understand it. We have to slow down to remain in loving relationship with God. And Peter Scazzaro says a sign that you and I are in loving union with God is that every cell in our body will be relaxed. I was thinking about how every cell in my body never relaxes. And I was thinking this morning, you know, ordination, to become an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church is a long process. It takes about 6 to 7 years, and they do a background check. You have to do a psychological assessment, more than one, actually. They ask you to write all these papers. They look into your financial background, and you're interviewed not just once, but twice, thoroughly. But no one ever asked me before I was ordained, are you a controlling person? If they had asked me that, I wouldn't be here today. But they didn't ask, and so you're stuck with me. Something I've learned is what this emotionally healthy discipleship is all about. George Lemon said it last week. It's about surrender. You remember during the pandemic, the prayer we prayed? We prayed it every single Sunday. It was about serenity. It was about courage. It was about wisdom. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'm all about giving it all you've got. But once we've done that, we need to surrender. And that's what being a disciple of Jesus Christ is really all about. And the more important it is to you, the more important it is to surrender it to God. I want you to think about that one thing you're most worried about right now. I mean, it's got you really tied up in knots. You can't sleep at night thinking about it. And the more important it is to you, the more important it is to give it to Jesus. You've heard me share this metaphor. I love doing laundry. It makes me feel like I'm in control, and I love the warm towels, and it makes me feel cozy. But I imagine Jesus, the Lord of my life, holding a laundry basket, and it's empty. And I take my worries, my concerns, my fears, colors and whites, and I toss it up into that laundry basket, and I let Jesus sort it out. Another practice, because I'm a real physical person, sometimes when I'm walking the beach and I'm really worried about something, I will just hurl it into the ocean with all my might. The more important it is to you, the more important it is to surrender it to God. I want to offer this invitation to you. I'm going to invite Betty Sparkman. She's going to share her testimony, if she'll come on up, or maybe she's already up. But while I'm talking, so we can save time, Betty, if you'll come on. If any of this today resonates with you, sign up. You can sign up by filling out this insert in the bulletin, or you can go to our website and sign up, or you can call the church office. But beginning February 13th, we're going to have a Sunday offering for 8 weeks for 2 hours, and we're going to have a Wednesday offering, 5:15. We're going to provide childcare and nursery. I'm going to facilitate both classes for 8 weeks, 2 hours a week. And you're thinking, oh, I don't have time. Well, if you don't have time, you, most of all, need to take the course. And I would say to you what Mother Teresa said, when we're at our busiest, that's when we most need to pray. Now, as I wrap up today, I would say to you that busyness is a big obstacle for remaining in deep, loving union with God. But as I was reflecting this week, I think the biggest obstacle is fear. We're afraid. If you remain in loving union with God in a deep and ever-abiding way, here's what's going to happen, and we're all terrified of it. Change. Mark Sin likes to say, Jesus is a change agent. And you start going deep with Jesus, your life, your pet thinking, your political views may even change. I know in my life, when I started getting serious with Jesus, change happened to me. I thought I was going to go to law school, went to seminary instead. I thought I would want to make a lot of money. I found out making a modest income, thank you very much, is much more worthwhile. I thought I would get married one day, and I'm finding the single life works better and is more fulfilling so far for what I do. I thought I would stay in North Mississippi and serve where it's snowing right now. Instead, I'm serving, thank God, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We're afraid of change. We like to say that Jesus is a way maker, but Jesus is also a change maker. So I'm going to invite you today to go deep. Let Jesus transform your life so that you will bear fruit that will last, abundant fruit, so that your cup will runneth over. So be it, and so it is. Amen.